Welcome to the Blue Security Podcast, a weekly podcast for information security defenders, where we bring you discussions on best practices, tools, and implementation for enterprise security. Now, here are your hosts for today's show, Andy Jha and Adam Brewer.
Welcome to another episode of the Blue Security Podcast. I'm Andy, your host.
I am Adam, your co-host.
Happy New Year to everyone. 26. This will be the first episode of the new year. We are going to be talking about Microsoft right away. So, Adam, if you want to give our standard disclaimer.
Yeah, Andy and I both work for Microsoft in our field security sales. We do the show outside of work and self-fund the show. So the opinions you're about to hear expressed are those of Adam Brewer and Andy Jha and do not reflect those necessarily of Microsoft Corporation. And with that, on with the show.
All right. So a couple months back in September, actually, we did an episode on Kerbroasting. And it was Kerbroasting in 2025, which, Kerbroasting has been around, I think, since 2014. So we were surprised when it was kind of a topic. But the reason why we even talked about it was there was a senator, Ron Wyden. He's a Democrat from Oregon. He wrote a letter to the FTC chairman about an investigation his office conducted of a ransomware attack that hit the healthcare giant Ascension back in 2024. And in that letter, he roasted Microsoft, pun intended, for keeping support of RC4, which is an encryption cipher, in Windows, enabled by default, which can lead to Kerbroasting as an attack. Now, to be clear, Microsoft put out a security advisory in 2013, 12 years ago. 13 now, recommending that RC4 be turned off. And then Microsoft published a blog in 2014 talking about the dangers of Kerbroasting. RC4 was disabled by default in Edge and Internet Explorer since 2016. But the issue was that Windows and Active Directory still accepted it. So even though Windows and Active Directory have been upgraded since then to support the more secure AES standards, RC4 was still enabled by default until now. So that's why we're talking about it. So I think really because of this letter that Senator Wyden wrote, Microsoft kind of kicked this into gear. So
I think you could also credit the Secure Future Initiative at Microsoft for this as well. So if you're not familiar with that, it's been this multi-year engineering sprint going on inside of Microsoft, both to harden our internal systems as well as what we ship to customers. And two of the principles in it are secure by design and secure by default. And so although it was possible to get to a secure state, it was not the default state. And so this also aligns with those principles. And we've been talking about it on this show many, many times that you should expect to see more defaults change in the future for how software ships out of the box from Microsoft, and it will be in a more secure state by default, potentially breaking compatibility or legacy compatibility, which in the past tended to be where Microsoft leaned toward. We want to maintain compatibility above all else. Now it is security above all else. And you have CEO permission at Microsoft from Satya Nadella, who says if you're ever faced with a trade-off between anything else and security, do security. So I think that's also part of this, but certainly Senator Wyden's letter probably did not.
Yeah. So what's new is Microsoft put out a blog, and it was put out actually on December 3rd of 2025. So just about a month ago, where saying in mid-2026, Microsoft will be updating the domain controller defaults for the Kerberos Key Distribution Center, or KDC, on Windows Server 2008 and later to only allow AES SHA-1 encryption. So RC will be disabled by default and only used if a domain administrator explicitly configures an account or KDC to use it. And so again, AES SHA-1 has been available and supported in Windows versions since Server 2000, and Windows clients by default authenticate using the much more secure standard, and servers respond using the same. The issue is if Windows servers by default, they will respond to an RC4-based authentication request and return an RC4-based response unless you've turned it off and you've rotated the old keys. So remember in our episode about Kerbroasting, part of the issue is that when you're migrating from RC4 to AES, if you disable the authentication, the old keys still exist. So you have to rotate the keys and make sure that they're updated with the new encryption standard. So, something that you can do before this happens, because like Adam said, part of the issue is that you may have some legacy systems that still rely on RC4, and that may break once these are updated. This standard is updated, and the KDCs will only accept AES SHA-1. So if you need to scope out an exception, you need to do that. There's also going to be some tools that are going to be available to help you identify. One is an update to the KDC logs that will track both requests and response that the systems make using RC4 when performing requests through Kerberos. And Microsoft is introducing a new PowerShell script to shift through the security event logs to more easily pinpoint problematic RC4 usage. So when we left the show back in September, we said that RC4 was going to be turned off in the future. Now we have at least some date, mid 2026. So, assume like June-ish timeframe.
One thing that's interesting about this that jumped off the page at me, Andy, is you mentioned that Windows 2008 and later will be updated to only allow AES SHA-1 encryption. Windows Server 2008 ended main extended support, which, and I'm going to be really specific with my language, extended support is the second 5 years of the 10-year life cycle. So the support everyone had ended in January 2020. If you purchased extended security updates, those ended January of 2023. So here we have a piece of software that is completely unsupported. No extended support, no extended security updates, which are two different things, by the way. Completely unsupported is receiving an update to disable this by default. So if you're still out there installing insecure Windows Server 2008 installation, at least you won't be using RC4 ciphers. If nothing else, that will be updated. That's kind of wild. That caught my ear for sure. Hopefully you don't have any systems communicating with RC4 at this point, but hope is not a strategy. So as Andy mentioned, and we will link in the show notes, there are tools coming available from Microsoft, including PowerShell script, an update to the KDC logs that will help you identify any systems still communicating and hopefully take action to remediate those, or if you need to carve out an exception. But overall, this is positive news. I think you will see more of this in the future. I expect you will see more of this in the future as Microsoft continues this Secure Future initiative to enable everything to be secure out of the box moving forward and not rely on, hey, did you read that post we did 13 years ago? You should really follow all the guidance in there. And although you can at least point to it and say, see, we told you so, it's way better if it just ships out of the box in a secure state. And if you need to do something to maintain legacy compatibility, that is an explicit effort on your part as the customer to get to that state. I think we can all agree that's a better place to be in 2026 and moving forward. So overall, I think this is all positive news and look forward to this and more updates like it in the future.
All right, so on to the main story that we wanted to talk about, which is this blog, which you linked to me, Adam, and you're like, hey, we should talk about this. It's the only information that I have about the author is written at the bottom of the blog. It's very like one of those archaic, like throwback blog sites where it's just really just a spewing of thoughts onto a web page. But at the bottom, it says William Brown, and he's Australian because the address is .au. And really, he said in 2025, yep, Passkeys still have problems. And so it's a really interesting article. Like I read through the whole thing. I know, Adam, you read through the whole thing. Like you said, Adam, I think when you first like look at the title, you're like, what is this guy gonna come up with?
What
right?
clickbait is this? Yeah.
Right. But if you read through it, yeah, there's some really good points in it. So the first part he talks about, which is what's changed in the last 12 months. So in all of 2025, the biggest change is the introduction of the FIDO credential exchange specification, which I didn't know existed.
I didn't either.
But what that does is it allows you to export your credentials, your pass keys, from one provider to another. So that's pretty cool. The issue is that it doesn't change the continual friction that exists using passkeys or the challenges of the day-to-day usage when you have devices from different ecosystems. And Adam, I can empathize with that because we both use iOS, we use Mac, we use Windows. So, that is an issue because as he'll refer to in this blog article, those are platform providers. And you can store your passkeys with that platform, like with Windows or Android or iOS. But when you're switching platforms, they don't necessarily sync back and forth. And so what happens is a user will end up with fragmented passkeys between their devices, or they're not aware that this credential exchange exists, that they can make the jump between providers or consolidate them into like a credential manager or password vault. So it's very realistic to assume that some users may feel that their passkeys are bound only to their phone, because most people, actually, I would say the majority of people, their phone is their primary computing device. And that would be safe to assume that they go to browsers and websites on their phone. And if a passkey is asked to be created, they'll create it on iOS or Android. And so they think that is where the passkey lives. So that's part of the issue, is different ecosystems, different devices, especially with most people, they just have a single device, really, is their phone. So part of the issue is also, and this exists not only between, however you want to call them, non-tech people. Adam and I usually refer to them as muggles.
Thanks, J.K. Rowling.
And also just, security folks, right? Passkeys are hard to conceptualize. Passwords, even though they have all these issues, it's easy for someone to grasp because it's something that they know. We've worked with passwords for many years. We obviously know that there's issues with passwords, but it works. And same thing with MFA or 2FA SMS, right? They get a text on their phone, they type in the code, and it's good to go. And we've streamlined that stuff, like with iOS. I haven't used Android, but like you get a text and it'll just pop up on the bottom. You don't even have to go to your messages to type it in. You just press the little button, right? So we've streamlined that process as well. But beyond that, we start to face issues because storing a password into a credential manager is an act of trust. And this is true even among security professionals. There are people who don't trust credential managers, or even online ones, I should say. Like there are some people who still use like KeyPass or something like that. That's a local password manager. And you're storing it and it's complex and you don't know the password anymore. You have to know the password to access the credential manager, but at least you can see the password in the vault, and
the one it's generated.
The one that's generated, right?
Yeah.
So it's still a tangible thing, right? Like you can see the password, you can print it off if you want to, you can type it in, even though it's a pain to type in, but it's something that you can still conceptualize. And then, password managers outside of like security folks and IT people, I think are extremely difficult for most people to tag onto. I just went on vacation with some friends of mine. They're not like technically inept. They're professionals who use computers every day. But when I think we were doing something and they had to type in their Apple password or something, and they're like, "Oh God, I don't know what this is," and they start typing it. And when that happens, which happens a lot, like outside of my tech bubble, outside of my security bubble, when that happens, I'm always like, wait, you don't use a password manager? But most people don't use password managers unless they're built into your browser, which is very easy because it says, do you want to store your password? By default, it asks you, do you want to store your password? And then most people use Chrome. Most people have Gmail. And so I would say like 50 to maybe 65% of people have their passwords stored in Chrome's like vault. And then, iPhone is also a big one. And so now it'll ask you if you want to store your passwords in iCloud keychain. And so like outside of that, people aren't going to use like a password vault. And they only use that vault that's built in for convenience of not having to type in the password that they already know. It's not like they're entering in like some random password. They're just entering in their regular, variation of the 5 passwords that they know. And then it's stored in the vault, and that's it, right? And so they don't have to type it in, which is a convenience for them, but it's not necessarily good security. So, beyond that, The password manager is obviously like, if you're using a password manager, that's great. And so like Passkeys from there is a little bit better, because if you're already storing your password there, it's not hard to jump to storing your TOTP, your time based, authentication codes in there, because same thing, you can see it. You can see the number regenerating every 30 seconds. You can see the random seed that is there. And if you're already trusting the password manager to store your passwords, why not use it to store your TOTPs? But then the passkeys, and this is an interesting point that he makes, there's nothing tangible in there. You can't see it. And so when I go to my password manager, which is 1Password, and I find an entry, it just says passkey saved on this date. There's like nothing that shows you what it is.
There's very little UI around it, and it's very opaque. You can't show me a signature, show me something,
Hash or whatever.
Yeah, anything.
Nothing.
Show me a random set of characters just so I can see that there's a thing behind it. And that thing exists. It's just the UI does not show any of that. And maybe they're not allowed to per FIDO standard, which I have not memorized, of course. But I agree with you. The UI in 1Password is very limited what it displays about passkeys, other than, yep, you got a passkey for this site.
It's in iCloud, same thing. Like if you look in your keychain, like it'll say like a passkey was stored, but you can't like, it's not like you can like print off, the hash or whatever it is that is behind the tech for the passkey. And so it is hard to conceptualize for a lot of people. And if you have never gotten to a credential manager, if you're still like on SMS 2FA, right? If you're like username, password, get a text. If that's your default and that's for everything, jumping to a credential manager with passkeys is like a quantum leap, right? And so that's what he said in his blog. This is the issue is, if you're already using Cred Manager like us, and I'm already storing TOTPs in my credential manager, or I store them in another, like Microsoft Authenticator, Authy, or Google, whatever, I'm already storing it somewhere. Okay, so I move to passkeys. That's not a huge leap. But if I'm like someone who's still using username, password, a password that I like, rotate 5 different passwords and I know them, and I get a text, now moving that to a credential manager and a passkey is big leap. So yeah, I definitely think that's a huge issue. Also, it's not by default. Most like organizations, most websites don't use passkeys by default.
They're starting to. I'm starting to see a lot of sites now will just prompt me automatically. Hey, do you want to? And I think we're going to get to this, Andy. There's still problems with how they communicate, and we'll touch on that in just a second. But it'll be like Amazon says, hey, do you want to sign in with your face or your fingerprint instead of typing in your old password every time? And what it's actually asking is, do you want to save a passkey to your 1Password? But they're trying to simplify the language, and they're actually making it more confusing. And again, we'll get to this because it sounds like Amazon's just scanning my face, which they're not.
Right.
But that's problematic too. And yeah, I think this is a really good point, and it resonates with me because for our listeners and our viewers, I assume all of you use a credential manager. And to us, the leap from all these other things to passkeys was super simple. Oh, all right, I just save a passkey my 1Password and it's on all my devices. This is great. Why would I not want to do this? But I had already gotten past all the mental hurdles to get there of, why can't I trust 1Password? Well, they use this encryption. There's this secret key. There's all these things. Okay, but I have to manage this single source of truth now for all my passwords. Yes, I do. And I had to do those for passwords, and I had to do those for TOTPs. And now I have to do it for passkeys. It's not really any different. And I have to be conscientious about, don't go save that in my iCloud keychain, or don't go save it to my Google account. Make sure it's in 1Password so it's acceptable and available everywhere. And I have already done all of that mental work to get there. But to your point, Andy, if you've just been running around, I've got 5 passwords in my head. I rotate through them. I increment the number every time it makes me reset them. This works for me. Now they force me to do this stupid FA thing, and I just get a text message, and thankfully Apple just lets me poke the button on my keyboard and it fills in. This is not bad. Why do I need this new thing? And all of this effort that goes with it is really challenging. Or if I save this and it's only on my iPhone, what do I do when I get on my work computer? How do I sign into that then? I see all of it. We're kind of making a good point here. So it's one of those where you just got to think of, For us, the magic users here, we use credential managers. We have already made peace with all of these hurdles we have to get over, but muggles have not. And these are the challenges with passkey adoption. Truly doesn't work until you're really bought in on a password manager, on a credential manager.
Yeah. And that's his next point, is really like, we have to teach people about password managers. And that's exactly the same process that we have to do with passkeys, because it's the same barrier to adoption. If we can't get them to understand and use password managers, they're really not going to use passkeys. They're going to continue to do what they're going to do. Also, he talks about vendor lock-in. I think this is a good point, especially when it comes to like a platform, right? Like Apple, if I store the stuff on the iCloud keychain, I can't use those. Like you said, I can't use them on my Windows computer, right? And so,
well, you can, in theory, install the iCloud plugin, and then it does have an extension for browsers. I don't know if passkeys work with that.
I don't know either.
Because, not to get off subject here, but Microsoft recently introduced an update to Windows to where credential managers can register as a passkey handler. There's actually in the settings app where you can configure that, and 1Password supports it because they actually are really great Windows developers. They have a great Windows app. It supports Windows Hello. It's awesome. Not sponsor the show, but just like their stuff. I don't know if Apple has done that. And Apple certainly would not be the first to be there like, hey, day one, we're here. We can register as a credential manager for passkeys in Windows. Although, to be fair, Apple has done a really good job with their recent software. The Apple Music app, the Apple TV app, the Apple Devices app actually are really modern, nice Windows apps. They're really gorgeous on Windows 11. They've done a good job. So maybe I shouldn't put it past them to do this, but I don't recall seeing anything about it. Anyhow, I don't mean to go on a tangent, but to your point, it's not easy. It's not intuitive. Again, muggles would not know, oh, well, I need to install the iCloud thing to do that. And then I sign in and then I can go. That's not that easy.
Yeah, I don't think, because like the 1Password is an actual like app and not an extension,
Right.
right? And like the iCloud keychain is an extension. I don't think Windows is going to recognize that.
I agree. So, and I'm not sure if passkeys sync through it yet. Passwords do, but again, it's like really basic. If you're used to using a credential manager, it's going back in time.
Yeah, it is. And that's part of the reason why I never moved to like iCloud Keychain as my primary like password manager, because I use 1Password or any credential manager. If I were to use Bitwarden or LastPass or whatever, right? I used it like for other things other than just passwords. So like I put secure notes in there. I made copies of like my passport and driver's license in case I lose it, and I need to like show that or whatever. So there's my social security card, my last will and testimony. I have copies, in there in the password vault just in case, digital copies. So I use it in a much different way than just passwords.
It's a secrets vault, not just a passwords vault.
Correct.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, either way, I think when you're on a platform, right, like it's a lot harder. And he made a point here, is it's not just where your keys are stored, it's also the friction of the interaction when you deviate from that vendor's intended path. And so like he has screenshots in his blog with Apple. And so like if you're not using the Touch ID or whatever on your phone to activate the iCloud keychain and you want to use something else, you have to like find the little other options. And then when you go to other options, it still kind of defaults you to the Touch ID. You have to like select the third party or whatever in order to, so there's like friction in the UI where it's, nudging you towards the way that they want you to do it, how they designed it. And if you are deviating with a third party, it's harder to do that.
Yeah, you're just making it harder if you just don't live in Johnny Ive's white world and have all of Apple devices. And then it's real easy. Sure, if all you use is Apple stuff, this isn't too bad for me. I get that. But for most people, they're going to have devices and exceptions and with their passwords. And that's the whole point of this. With my password, well, I could print it out. I could type it out. I could write it down. I could know it in my head. There's a way to make that portable. It's so obtuse. How do I take this somewhere else that's not in Johnny Ive's white world? Gets really hard all of a sudden.
And also he makes a point about vendor lockout. So like I don't know how often this happens, but he has a few examples in here of like there was a post, I think on Reddit or something like that, where their Android device stopped recognizing the passkey that was stored on the device. That would be, and if you only had a passkey, or maybe you had user password and then a passkey as your like MFA or whatever, um, that would be an issue, right? Like if you still had a backup, most of my accounts still have like, the standard as a backup with username, password, SMS or TOTP or whatever, right? So that's still there. But like once we get somewhere where like passkey is the only thing, I would be pretty ticked off if like my device stopped recognizing the passkey. And there's also this blog that he linked to where this Apple developer.
Oh my gosh.
Did you read that?
Oh yeah. So I'm pretty linked in the Apple ecosystem. I read a lot of Apple people blogs, and some of the most prominent Apple bloggers, like John Gruber, were posting about this on his site, basically trying to help this poor guy get back into his account. And it finally took someone on the executive relations team to go fix this, which I can relate. I had the same problem once. My Apple ID, many years ago, I had used it to take training when I sold Macs at my university bookstore. And it turned my Apple ID into this weird, like not completely consumer thing, and all sorts of stuff broke in it, especially iCloud stuff. And no one could fix it. And the only way I ever got it fixed, same thing, executive relations team. I wrote an email to Eddie Q, who at the time managed all of Apple's services. And Eddie forwarded it to someone on his executive relations team. And they're like the ninjas of Apple who can fix anything Apple ID related. But you shouldn't have to email an Apple executive to get your stuff fixed. And Apple was just telling this guy, yeah, sorry, you lost 25 years of your Apple ID. Go pound sand. Thanks for being an Apple customer. Hey, by the way, head down to your Apple store and go pick up a new Apple Watch. Why don't you? I mean, it was ridiculous.
Crazy. I read through the whole blog, and basically, what in a nutshell, this guy used a gift card that he purchased from a retail store, like a Best Buy or Walmart or whatever. He lives in Australia, so I don't know if it was like one of those. But imagine, right? Just a physical gift card that he purchased, and he tried to redeem it, and something happened with the gift card, like it was already used or something, and they basically flagged his account for fraud, and they closed it. Like it was done, terminated. And so it's like he couldn't log into anything. iMessages, his photos were backed up there. Like none of his devices worked anymore. Mac, Apple TV, everything done. And he had this Apple ID for like 20 some years. He was a developer. He wrote books on Swift. Like this was not like, just some random guy, right? He was like well known in the Apple industry. So that would scare the living crap out of me.
These companies can still just arbitrarily decide to terminate your account, and there's basically no recourse because they're private business and they can do what they want and they can deny service to anyone at any time. And there's very little you can do about it. I mean, you can threaten a lawsuit, but
it's kind of
requires money and time and lawyers and everything else. I mean, it's crazy. Again, I mean, same boat. I was completely darn near locked out of everything, and the only way I got it fixed was email an Apple executive.
What's interesting too is that, you said that they can like revoke stuff at any time. It's also interesting, like when you buy stuff, like with Apple, it's very different than like the era that we grew up in where you would buy a movie, a physical copy, and you owned it. Like you owned that movie and you can do whatever you want with that movie. But in the digital age, you don't own that movie. If I buy something on Apple, like Marketplace or whatever, I don't own that movie. They can revoke the rights.
It's a license, yeah.
Yeah, it's a license. It's a digital license, and like they can take that away. Like if whatever studio is like, we had this feud with Apple and we're not going to allow it anymore, they can just take it away.
Now, to be fair, over the iTunes store now is 23 years old. Selling movies a little less long than that, but still, that basically has not happened, but it is still possible. Yeah.
Technically possible, right? So it's just, it's something that you do have to think about. We obviously are all beholden to a lot of these digital services that we use all the time. And so that was kind of just a wake-up call in the story that is worth reading what happened. And he did get it back in the end.
Right. Same. I've obviously tried to greatly reduce my reliance on Google, but ultimately an email account is kind of the point of failure for a lot of your security. And I have my Google account really hardened and locked down, but if I ever lost access to it, and this is the whole thing too, right? Resilience is also something people are really bad at. Even technically minded people, mind you, are bad at resilience and having resiliency plans and being able to think through when, if I couldn't get to this, how could I still do that? And that's something, man, you got your father in law to finally use a credential manager, but what if they forget their one password to get into their one password account? There is no recourse. There is nothing you can do. You can't call one password and complain. There's nothing. Did they store it in a safe? Did they store it in a bank deposit box? That's where, to me, and Andy, I think we're going to talk about this. For really important things, I store passkeys in multiple services. I store passkeys in multiple, well, I still put them on a FIDO2 security key on a YubiKey to make sure I can get into them. So, I mean, for my Google account as an example, a lot of these accounts do let you make multiple passkeys. So I have one in my 1Password. I have one in my Apple keychain. I have several on physical FIDO security keys. So I'm trying to hedge my bets. Like, even if Apple locks me out, or even if 1Password locks me out, I have another way to still get into it. And I'm not normal. We're not normal on this show, right? Most people would just look at that and their head would spin and be like, well, forget it. I'll just go write my password down on a Post-it note and call it a day.
Yeah. 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 So you mentioned this earlier about like providers miscommunicating. Like, they're implementing passkeys, but then like they don't understand what they are, and they like put out some sort of, banner or something like that on the web page and say, hey, you should use passkeys because they're more secure. And the author of this blog mentioned that he got some communication from a company that emailed him this statement. It said, passkeys use your unique features known as biometrics, like your facial features, your fingerprint, or a pin, to let us know that it's really you. They provide increased security because, unlike a password or username, they can't be shared with anyone, making them phish resistant. And when he asked his partner about this, who is a veterinary surgeon, she's an educated person, her interpretation was, so does that mean a passkey sends my face or fingerprint over the internet for the service to verify? Is that also why they believe it's phish resistant, because you can't clone my face or my fingerprint? Which is a reasonable response for someone who doesn't really understand how, like, encryption and ciphers and how, we store things locally on the device in the TPM and
public
blah, blah,
private key cryptography.
Right. It's a reasonable response, right? Even if you're not in security.
Well, and that's how a lot of these sites are almost trying to advertise passkeys of like, hey, this is easy. It just scans your face or your fingerprint. But the communication is so poor about who is doing that, who is validating that, because we know it's your iPhone, it's your Windows PC, you're typing in your 1Password into 1Password, and that's how you're unlocking it. But to muggles, it just sounds like, oh, so now Amazon is scanning my face to let me in. I don't know how I feel about that. Google gets my face too. This doesn't sound good. I don't like this. And you don't have to be a tinfoil hat person to start thinking like, man, I don't want to share my biometrics with all these companies. And Apple did a really good job of like, this is on device, this is secure, this is never transmitted, this is never anything. And the way they communicate suggests otherwise. And even though that's not true, it's one of those things where simplicity is harder than complexity. Being able to explain something accurately in a simple way is sometimes way more difficult. It's, by the way, kind of one of the telltales of AI models, large language models today, is they write overly verbose text. They're actually really bad at writing succinct text. And this is where obviously whoever wrote this meant well, but didn't accurately capture it. And maybe the problem is passkeys are just still too complicated. The way you interact with them is just still too complex. And so unless you take the time to understand them, it doesn't really get easier. And we always love a good car analogy. But the thing is, you don't have to explain to someone what oil actually does for most people to know you need to change your oil. They understand that conceptually of, you have to change my oil. Yes, I have to rotate my tires. Why? They probably can't explain that, but they know they're important. How can we get to a state like that where you don't need to know the ins and outs of, well, the oil lubricates this part of the engine and that? Just know that this is the way it works and this is what you have to do. Like that level of detail could be sufficient, but I don't think we're there yet. We have not reached that overall level of literacy like we have with, say, automobile ownership, where 98% of automobile owners understand that you have to change the oil and rotate the tires. Again, even if they can't explain why, they know you need to. And we're not there yet with passkeys at all. We're not remotely close.
No, I think, when, let's say I take a muggle, right, and I give them a website, and even if passkeys is like the default, if it's like they're in the 50, 60% of people that use Chrome as their default in Gmail, and it stores it in Chrome, and then they use Chrome on their device as well, then you might have a little bit of, like adoption there. But until it is completely seamless, because if I were to go on a Windows device and I'm like a regular person and maybe I use Edge or I use Brave or something, and I don't use Chrome, or let's say I use Chrome and then I have an iPhone and I don't use Chrome on the iPhone, I use Safari. If I try to log into a website that I have a passkey stored in my Chrome browser manager and I can't log into it on my Apple device because I'm not using Chrome, right there, it might be a showstopper for most people. They're like, I don't understand what's going on, right? Like I stored some passkey somewhere on my computer, but it's not working on my phone, right?
And
so,
we're talking about all these very real scenarios and all these very challenging scenarios, and there is more work to do. But it isn't all doom and gloom, right? And the good news is, and I was all wound up when I clicked this link to go fire off an email to this dude, is like, look, the technology is secure. And he wasn't arguing that otherwise. So if you've got your torch and your pitchfork, you can set them down. Passkeys are great in a lot of ways. They're, from a security perspective, they're highly secure. They are maybe the future, hopefully the future. But you understand that the challenges with them are more around the platform providers and more around the human computer interaction, the human computer connection point, touch point, than they are problems with the technology. So that's the good news, is the technology is sound and secure. It's how do we get to that future? And in all honesty, platform providers are going to act in their own best interest. And we have seen more of this than ever lately, where I feel like Apple has eroded a lot of the goodwill they built up over being the underdog for so long, and they became the 800-pound gorilla and slowly exerted their control more and more. And we've seen all of the antitrust they've gone through lately, and their malicious compliance with it has been really unattractive. But that's what platform companies do. And Google has faced a lot of their own antitrust concerns as well, although they appear to escape it with very minimal consequences. And it's one of those things where we kind of just got past a lot of the regulatory action occurring. So our hope for more regulatory response is probably not coming imminently. And these platform providers really do act in their own best interest. So for the most part, that's not going back to the doom and gloom, but just saying there isn't some Gandalf the White is not going to show up on Shadowfax to save the day all of a sudden. Come back to us now at the turn of the tide kind of thing. We're going to have to kind of do this for ourselves and continue to educate and help the people in our lives understand maybe the best path forward, Andy. And I mean, what do you think that is? Is it helping people understand taking their own personal control of credential managers?
I mean, credential managers are a great, like third-party credential managers, I still think is key. Like I got my kids started on that very young. I have my wife using it and she's not a tech person. I have not started training them on using passkeys, even though that's available and they're already using credential managers. So that is probably at some point I'm going to, because they already have the credentials saved and now they have to like go back to, in like 1Password has a great feature called Watchtower where you can go in and look at sites that you have stored there. And if you don't have a passkey associated with it, it'll say, hey, there's a passkey available for this entry. Like you should go and do that. I haven't gone and done that for, everyone, for my kids, for my wife. And that'll probably I'll do that at some point. But for now, I mean, they know there's a TOTP stored there. They know the username and password. And like my kids know how to copy that, over. And I'm pretty happy with that. But I think, that is the key thing. If you're not even using a credential manager, you got to get started on that. And I understand the difficulties with that. So if you're not using a cred manager, Passkeys is kind of a pipe dream, I think, in reality. And then for like critical accounts, like you said, Adam, have those passkeys stored in multiple different places, which you can do. And that's part of the confusion also with passkeys, is that you can store passkeys on different devices for the same account. Right. So that like for most people, their minds are gonna explode because they don't understand why that is.
Yeah, go back to, if they're coming from the mental model of passwords, there is one password for this account. This account, username at domain.com, has this password for it. And I can sign in from multiple devices because I use that same password. But the idea of I have to generate multiple passkeys is so foreign if you haven't wrapped your brain around it. It would be really hard. It's kind of like that scene in the Matrix when Neo is trying to process like all of this information about the world he knew did not really exist, and the world is actually this dark, scary, stormy place, and there's all these weird people with ports in their neck running around this spaceship and eating gruel, and then he just vomits and blacks out. And that's kind of what Mr. William Brown has made the point here on. There's a path to follow with credential managers where you kind of learn more as you go. And for us who've been using them for years, adding passkeys was like, oh, this is great. This is super easy. It was not a big leap because we had already accepted all those other things as facts. We have a port in our neck and we live on this spaceship and we eat this gruel. But to someone who's processing all of that for the first time, that's a lot to handle.
Yeah. Yeah. And so like for us, once you get to the point where you are storing passkeys in a cred vault, then start storing multiple passkeys for the critical things, like on a FIDO2, hardware key. So like I have a hardware key for my email, which is probably the most important one. And then also for my credential manager, I have a hardware key. So
have for my Microsoft corporate account. We've talked on the show many times how Microsoft moved to 100% phish resistant MFA for sign-in. In reality, that meant for most muggles, they have a device-bound passkey stored in the Microsoft Authenticator app on their phone. That scares the heck out of me. I do not want a scenario where I get locked out and have to go grovel before the Microsoft help desk. So Microsoft will ship you a FIDO2 security key for free if you ask nicely. And so I got one. Andy, I know you got one. And that just gives me some additional opportunity, a different way to log in case the device-bound passkey on my phone doesn't work for whatever reason, or my phone falls in the toilet or whatever. It's nice to have that resiliency for a really important account. It's pretty important to be able to sign in and do my work every day. So
yeah, and we store passkeys, for Microsoft. I have a passkey for my, corp account on my issued Surface device for my account. I have one on the authenticator, but I also have that physical security key. And I will tell you that most of the time, the physical security key is the easiest one.
Yes.
It always works. Despite, obviously like having to have the security key somewhere or whatever and keeping that, it always works.
And that could be, as we talk through this and we're kind of learning as we go, if you're introducing someone to something, having a physical representation of it could be helpful. So if you're working with, say, an in-law who's a Gen X or an older generation, being able to say, hey, for your really important accounts, let's put them all in this thing and then go put them in like the safe in your bedroom or something. They can grasp that. They can understand that. And then it's like, well, hey, I need you to go get in your Gmail account. They're like, oh, crap, I forgot this, I forgot that. It's like, go get the key that you put in your safe in your bedroom, your fireproof safe. It's a physical thing to go get. And some people have an easier time grasping that too. So don't sleep on it.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, this was a great show to start the new year with. Hopefully this was an interesting discussion for you guys. Thanks for watching and listening. As always, that's our show for this week. Our contact information will be in the show notes as well as the links to the articles that we used for the show. They will be in there as well. If you have any questions or topics you want us to talk about in the future, please email us. Thanks, and we'll talk to you guys next week.
Thank you for listening to the Blue Security Podcast. Please check out the show notes, catch up on episodes you may have missed, and subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. Find Andy on Twitter @AJaw0 and Adam @AJBrewer. See you at our next episode.